Not that I know of.
You know,
I know he likes
aside from everything else, he hardly merits, putting his name on the center along with Kennedy. And the presidencies could not have been more in contrast. Kennedy was a charismatic, humane, farsightful leader. He steered us through the worst crisis in recent times, the Cuban Missile Crisis. He turned around from being a unremitting Cold War to a peacemaker. He negotiated the most important treaty in the history of the world. You know what that was, Sam?
The Bans Treaty, right?
Yes, the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, the partial, that stopped us from poisoning our oceans, our atmosphere, and the soil. You might not be around, Sam, if not for that treaty.
Yikes.
He and his wife represented high culture in the nation's capital. Nothing, and he, had very strong public approval ratings. And since his assassination, many in the public and many scholars like myself have lamented its effect on our nation. I don't buy into the old Camelot myth, but nonetheless, the Kennedy administration was a high point of people's belief and confidence in their government, the belief that government was working for ordinary people. It has since plummeted and has hit, a near low point under Donald Trump, who thinks he should be putting his name arbitrarily ahead of that of John F. Kennedy. It's a travesty, and it's not even clear it's legal, Sam, right?
Right.
The Kennedy Center was created by an act of Congress. Not that Trump cares,
Congress? He doesn't care about Congress.
He doesn't care about anything but himself. Doesn't care about the Congress. Doesn't care about the courts. And there are lawsuits challenging what he's done. Now, the reasons why. I think, in part, it is to save himself the embarrassment of all of these cancellations. Let me go over some of them. I mean, they're incredible. Hamilton, the extraordinary composer Philip Glass, who withdrew the world premiere of his symphony celebrating Lincoln. Trump has compared himself to Lincoln. It's like myself comparing myself to the heavyweight champion of the world in terms of boxing. That's how far off it is.
You do that all the time to me.
I do, yeah. You're right. At 5'6", 150, I'm ready to take him on. Rhonda Fleming, the Grammy-winning soprano, the renowned Martha Graham Dance Company, the renowned Washington National Opera, Sam. I did something on opera. How about that?
Shout out to my friend Elliot Antokis. I've been to a few National Washington opera.
The great Issa Rae. And here's a very ironic one, the U.S. Marine Band.
Really?
Yeah, Trump has always touted himself as the great champion of the military. This is just a sampling. So one element of this, Trump hates being embarrassed. It's the one thing he can't easily turn around. You can turn around attacks. Embarrassment is something else. Very difficult for Trump to deal with. Doesn't want to be embarrassed by empty seats. Doesn't want to be embarrassed by all these cancellations. Second reason, it's the same thing he's doing to the White House. He wants to reconstruct the Kennedy Center to put his own garish mark on it. Look what he's done to the White House with his marble and gilding everything, trying to turn it into a Palace of Versailles of the French kings. He wants to do the same thing to the Kennedy Center. And I was watching his press conference about that. And he said, we need these renovations. The Kennedy Center is falling apart. Well, there was a major renovation just 7 years ago. They didn't give us any specific information of why a huge renovation is needed again after just 7 years. And he said, this is building, and I'm really great and successful at building. Again, that's a bit like me saying I'm really successful at heavyweight boxing. It couldn't be farther from the truth. The world is littered with Donald Trump's failed building prospects. Just look at the hole in the wall, in the holes in the ground in Tampa and Fort Lauderdale, the disasters in Atlantic City, in Canada, in the Caribbean, in Eastern Europe. Trump's failures are littered all over the world. He doesn't build anything.
I'm going to say, he hasn't built anything in forever. He just sells his
Now he
name.
just sells his name because he can't build anything.
Right.
What he's tried is such a failure. Then look at his other enterprises that have failed. Trump Steaks, Trump Vodka, Trump Air, Trump University, Trump Institute. You know, the failures just mount up. What Trump is really good at is not building, constructing anything, not starting businesses, but two things. One, somehow escaping every failure he's had, and there are dozens of them, unscathed. Somehow it's always someone else who is hurt, like the bankruptcies. You know, somehow he didn't actually pay anything in his bankruptcies, as far as I could tell, or very little, and use them to get a huge, I think it was about a $70 million tax return from the government, tax refund.
So your two main points are that he's embarrassed and he wants to make his mark on it. But couldn't he do both of those things without shutting it down, don't you think?
No, I don't see how he could do both of those ventures without shutting it down.
I still think there's something that we don't know. That's
well, there
happening.
always is with Trump, but, you know,
it feels very
the unknown, right? It's not the known unknown, it's the unknown unknown.
It just feels very strange and sketchy to me. I don't know.
But I think those two motives are, you know, given who Trump is, are pretty powerful motives. So the one thing that Trump is the best ever at is escaping accountability no matter what he does. And that goes all the way back to the early 1970s. It goes back over 50 years when he was first caught with a very credible case by the Justice Department for violating the Fair Housing Act by discriminating against minorities in New York in his rental. And somehow he hired, you know who he hired? I think you do. Roy Cohn, the notorious lawyer for the red-baiting Joe McCarthy. And, you know, they obfuscated, they delayed, they attacked, they obstructed until the whole thing faded away. So for 50 years, he's avoided accountability in every failure or every illicit act that he has committed. The other thing he is great at is grifting. You know, there have been stories saying, you know, his grift has netted him over $1 billion since he started his presidency. And now he has taken us to unimaginable grifts, right? Who is he suing?
Himself. The IRS.
Suing the IRS for leaking the tax returns that he promised he would release anyway, but broke.
It's really
those promises.
He's really suing the taxpayer because,
of course,
the money that he would be paid in that $10 million lawsuit would come from taxpayer money.
So the very hardworking people who go from paycheck to paycheck, have their taxes deducted, who he claims to represent, are the ones who'll be paying through the nose if he gets this $10 billion grift.
Crazy. You know, I'll explain to you why this Kennedy Center thing is weird to me, okay? So he spent all this time and energy, like you said, essentially taking it over, right? Replacing the board with a bunch of loyalists, literally changing the name, putting his own name on it, right? So ticket sales are bad and acts are canceling. He lies about crowd size and sales all the time. People who are canceling, he'll just say that they're lunatic left-wingers like he does everybody else. It's not adding up to me. Like again, he can brush off.
I don't think
things.
so.
And again, he spent so much time and energy to take over the Kennedy Center just to close it.
But he's going to close it and put his mark on it. That's the thing. If he was just closing it, I think you're right.
Right, but by the time it's done, he's going to be leaving almost.
Doesn't matter. It's his legacy. It's what he wants. Just like he wants to totally redo the White House according to his own predilections. That's why he put his name on the Kennedy Center, not for something temporary, but he wants his legacy to be all over. If he had his way, we'd name everything. You know, the Lincoln Memorial will become the Trump and Lincoln Memorial, right?
Ridiculous.
That's exactly what he wants.
A lot of people in the chat are saying that he's planning to tear it down.
Wouldn't surprise me. I don't trust. Remember the ballroom, right, Sam? He said the ballroom is not going to have any effect, and this is pretty much a direct quote, on the existing structure of the White House. And what's the first thing he did, Sam? Demolished a part of the White House,
Right.
demolish the historic East Wing, which goes back to Teddy Roosevelt in the early 20th century. So anything he says, any promises he makes are worth about as much as these 3 pieces of paper in my hand.
Nice. Good one.
Maybe the paper's worth more than his promises. I
Maybe.
probably can get at least 2 cents out of them.
Right. Our next topic. President Trump is urging Republicans to push for the federal government to take over greater control over how elections are run nationwide, calling for what he described as the, quote, nationalization of elections.
Yeah, as we all know, Trump cares nothing for the Constitution, cares nothing for American traditions. Under the Constitution, the states administer elections. And what party for decades has been championing states' rights?
GOP.
The GOP has been, right out front identifying as the party of states' rights. But as I point out in my book, which is right behind us, that's all been a facade. They've never cared a whit about states' rights. They just want to impose their agenda, things like a national right to life amendment. They were, behind prohibition, which canceled the laws of at least a third of the states. So they don't give a whit about states' rights, even though they profess to be the party of states' rights. And if anyone still thought there was any truth to that, this latest idea of nationalizing elections ought to put that to rest. But we also know Trump cares nothing about the Constitution, which leaves the administration of elections to the states. But it does have a role for the federal government, Sam. But is that a role for the president?
Congress, I'm assuming.
Congress. It's very specific. Congress can, in fact, make laws regarding elections and has done so, most famously, the Voting Rights Act of 1964. The only role for the executive is enforcing, taking care to see that the laws are faithfully executed. Beyond that, the president has zero role in controlling elections. What Trump is doing is against what he and his party have been professing for decades and is contrary to the Constitution of the United States. There is no such thing under our Constitution, and I notice and Trump doesn't care, of a federal president nationalizing elections. That is anti-American. You can go all the way back to the framers and American traditions, as well as the American Constitution, which conservatives supposedly, respect according to the literal meaning of the words in the Constitution. Moreover, he's made patent. He doesn't care about election integrity because he hasn't talked about the nationalization of all elections, has he? He's talked about some 15 places, not the whole country.
I wonder what color those states usually go in presidential elections.
Yes, and you can imagine, the mix between whites and minorities in those places.
I heard Mike Johnson today talking about this and saying, he called out blue states in particular, and he said, well, something to the degree of, I think there's a lot of fraud going on in blue states, even though I don't have any evidence to prove that. So in his own sentence, he said, there's no actual evidence of it. I'm just talking out my ass.
Right, which he always does, like Trump. But it goes beyond no evidence. This really bothers me when the press says Trump alleges fraud with no evidence. It's worse than that. Trump alleges, or Mike Johnson alleges fraud, contrary to a mountain of evidence.
Right.
That's the real truth. Evidence from his own Department of Justice, his own cybersecurity outfit within his administration said it was, historically secure and fair election. Evidence from 60 court cases. He lost every single significant case. Evidence from the recounts and investigations by state elected officials, most of whom are Republicans, just like Raffensperger in Georgia, the Secretary of State, a conservative Republican, and contrary to every independent audit of voting in 2020. The result is you are more likely to get hit by lightning than someone is likely to cast an illegal vote in an American election.
Now, we talked about how the president isn't supposed to be involved in this, but he has urged Republicans in Congress to push for this. Do you think there's any chance Republicans in Congress are going to go for this?
Sure.
Really?
But I don't think they have enough votes. The problem is, they can only lose a couple of votes in the House, and unless they break the filibuster rule, and I don't think they will, they need 60 votes in the Senate, and they're nowhere close to that.
Right.
But it's really frightening. What he's planning is to essentially rig the elections. I forgot the third thing that Trump is a genius at: projection. Right.
Right.
He is projecting his own attempt to fraudulently rig an election upon his political opponents who don't do that. Why didn't they do it in 2024? Did they somehow forget? Did they somehow, we have a conscience, we're not going to do it again? What a pile of nonsense.
Apparently, John Thune has already dismissed this notion. So, and they would have to get
Thune is a traditionalist, at least, a bit of it.
And they would have to get it done pretty quickly. I mean, the midterms are coming up in what, less than a year. So
less than a year, 10 months.
Seems unlikely, but it's still pretty scary.
It's very scary, and they're not going to stop. Hopefully, after the midterms, Democrats will have the House, and who knows about the Senate, but they should retake the House. Remember, a Democrat won a state Senate election in Texas, in a state a district that Trump won by 17 points. The Democrat won by something around 14, a 30 to 31 point swing. That's unheard of. And this is not a little district, because there are a very few state Senate districts. This state Senate district has more people in it than a congressional district. It's got 1 million people. Congressional district's about 800,000. So this is not, a tiny little blip. I'm not saying it portends the Democrats making a comeback in Texas. But what this may mean, if there's some validity to it, is the Republicans may have made a huge mistake in gerrymandering Texas, because they may have shaved those new Republican districts a bit too finely, +5 or so. That may not be enough for a Republican to win those districts, based on what we know from the off year and special elections.
President Trump has signed a bill to end a very brief government shutdown, essentially a long weekend, temporarily funding the Department of Homeland Security for 2 weeks as negotiations about ICE funding and DHS funding continue.
What's the cliche, Sam? Kick the can down the road?
Yes.
Yes, this does not resolve the controversy over the Department of Homeland Security and what it's doing to the American people. It just postpones it for a couple of weeks. I want to remind people of something that for some reason even the mainstream media has lost.
Tell us.
There was a bipartisan plan in 2024, in the last Congress, to actually solve the immigration problem. It was a combined plan with bipartisan support.
Right.
Heralded, led by conservative Senator Langford of Oklahoma, I think he is. It would combine strict border security with a path for citizenship for undocumented immigrants who committed no crime, contribute to the economy, could pass citizenship tests. It would have gone so far to resolve this incredibly thorny issue. Who killed it, Sam?
Donald J. Trump.
Right, because he does not want to solve the immigration problem.
Crazy.
Crazy. And it's backfiring on him. He thought it would be a big plus politically for him. It's now a big minus for him. He's now underwater on his signature issue of immigration. Majorities of Americans think ICE has gone too far, Border Patrol, and even now Americans, by a small margin, believe ICE should be abolished. That's astounding.
And the crazy thing is just the amount of money that's being promised to ICE. Their 2026 budget request was originally $11.3 billion, and then Trump's bill, the big ugly bill, raised the ICE funding by $127 billion. So their funding would be somewhere in the ballpark of $138.8 billion. That's more than the UK or India spend on their entire military.
And you know what? They said we can't afford to give hungry people food stamps, right?
And we've got to fire all of these government employees because we want to save money.
And we can't give Medicaid benefits to people who can't afford insurance or doctors. And we can't reauthorize the Obamacare subsidies so people's health insurance premiums will not become unaffordable. No, we can't do any of that.
Here's $100 billion.
But here's $100 billion. Go terrorize the nation.
And another thing we forgot to talk about during the Kennedy Center thing. A lot of people work for the Kennedy Center, and they just woke up one day and found out their job was gone for the next 2 years.
That is very, very important because that's exactly what they did with the Doge, right?
Yeah.
Just take a chainsaw, firing people. You know, these billionaires who live this lavish lifestyle, don't worry about anything, couldn't care less about depriving the jobs of ordinary Americans who are going to struggle to feed their families, put a roof over their heads, to get food, to get health insurance. It's obscene. It could not be more immoral and more obscene.
Speaking of some of those rich mofos, newly released Jeffrey Epstein documents name powerful figures like Donald Trump, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk. The files include extensive redactions, renewing scrutiny over who may be implicated and what remains hidden. I know a lot of the survivors and victims of Epstein are not happy.
To say the least, they're incensed by three things. One, they're incensed because despite all the protestations of Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, about how carefully they tried to protect the survivors found their identities have been exposed. Even after they're 42 days late beyond the deadline in releasing this material, they still are so incompetent or so evil, I don't know which, or some combination, that they're still exposing the survivors. Two, the survivors are livid because while some of them are being exposed, a lot of the rich and powerful connections are being redacted. They're redacting a lot of names that are not survivors for absolutely no reason other than to limit the information that the public receives. And that's contrary to the legislation of Congress. Third, they're incensed because there are millions of files yet to be released. Somewhere between 2.5 and 3 million files. Oh, we're not going to bother. We're not going to release them. Again, directly contrary to the laws of Congress. But even with all of those redactions, all of those limitations, a lot of rich and powerful people were found to have a relationship of some kind or another. Hard to tell. But Bill Gates, certainly. Larry Summers, former president of Harvard, Secretary of the Treasury. Elon Musk, Steve Bannon, Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, particularly egregious because he lied. He said, I stopped, dealing with Epstein in the early 21st century, the early 2000s. False. He kept communicating with him long after that. In fact, a lot of these guys have lied.
That's what I was about to say. Elon Musk lied too. He said that Jeffrey Epstein was begging him to come to the island and he refused. That's not what the emails look like.
Not even close. These emails, to the extent, they released anything, and I'm sure lots of it is being withheld. And all of a sudden, Oh, Steve Tisch, one of the owners of the Giants, got exposed as well. And, of course, once these guys get exposed, they don't regret their relationship with Epstein. What do they regret, Sam?
Being caught.
None of them fessed up, including Donald Trump. Never fessed up, lied about it.
Trump is in the files. His name is mentioned 1,500 times.
Yeah, exactly. But he claims, it all exonerates me. Yeah, of what?
Of what, yeah.
And let's not forget, he sent that obscene birthday card, an outline of a woman talking about sharing secrets as late as 2003. He said Epstein was a great guy, and like me, he loves beautiful women, and he likes them young. Let's not forget, Epstein said, of course, Donald Trump knew about the girls. He's the voice that didn't bark. So, these guys are just in it up to, and Bill Clinton too. These guys are in it just up to their necks. They don't regret it. They regret getting caught, and only when they're caught, they say, oh my God, what a mistake I made. I'm so sorry. I regret it.
No, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are claiming they're totally exonerated. They're not apologizing at all.
Tisch and Lutnick were apologizing. Yeah, Trump says he's totally exonerated.
Right, and Elon Musk, I don't even know what he said. Point is,
he's not in government. Lutnick is in government. Trump is in government. I don't see how Lutnick could survive this, but in the Trump administration, I'm sure it doesn't matter.
Brian Dakota said, "Hey, Professor, I just became a member right before the stream. Thanks for becoming a member,
Thank
Brian.
you.
I appreciate that." Oh, no. I got to get him his drink.
I need my drink. If you want me to last for an hour, you did it.
Look at this guy. He drinks soda with the plastic still attached to it.
Hey, I have a bad arm. It's hard to pull the plastic off. But for those of you who've been following my total shoulder replacement surgery, I am 90% recovered and have very few restrictions. The one thing my surgeon said I absolutely can do, but it's not entirely under my control. And what does that say?
Run?
Fall.
Oh, fall.
You can't fall. Well, I'm trying, but, I can't 100% guarantee I'll never fall. But I am being very careful, and I'm not running hard yet, not in this weather.
Right. There's nowhere to really run right now.
When I was young and a world-class runner, I ran in everything. That's why I broke my wrist.
The Department of Homeland Security is increasingly using administrative subpoenas to obtain Americans' data, a legal tool that does not require prior court approval.
They don't believe in court approval anyway, right? Don't they say ICE can break into your house on their own volition without a judge-signed warrant, directly contrary to the Fourth Amendment. This is really frightening because one of the preludes to a authoritarian government is surveillance. When you have a surveillance state and you have all this information about individuals, it becomes so much easier to clamp down on dissenters, on those with whom you disagree. This has fallen through the cracks. I've said it before, but I will repeat it again. Trump issued a presidential memorandum, a very strong presidential initiative, criminalizing speech that he doesn't like, criminalizing, and authorizing law enforcement to go after speakers like they're going after the mafia. And these are vague, broad things like anti-Christian, anti-American, anti-capitalist. Under this presidential memorandum, you can be prosecuted for this. And let's not forget, Trump says, what we're doing in Minneapolis is all about apprehending illegal immigrants. And you note they've made a big shift here. And again, the media's missed this. Their original justification was, who are they going to go after, Sam?
The worst of the worst.
The worst of the worst. Now they've made a subtle but critically important shift that all illegal immigrants are the worst of the worst because all of them have broken the law. And we don't have to worry about them being real criminals or really dangerous. It's a critical shift that they've made that has really gone without sufficient commentary, but we're bringing it to you here.
Good point, Dad.
And the final point I want to make,
Okay.
supposedly Minneapolis is all about immigration enforcement. And yet Bundy has said, we'll pull out of Minneapolis or de-escalate. In return for what? Do you remember?
Voter rolls.
Voter rolls. What the hell does that have to do with immigration? It shows this is their real motivation. The surveillance society, the cracking down on those they don't like, and the rigging of elections. Has nothing to do with getting criminals out of this country.
The chat wants me to pull your plastic off for you.
Oh, thank you.
Let's see. There we go.
He did it. He's a hero.
Here it is, folks.
Wow.
Make sure this doesn't go in the ocean.
All right. Are we
All right.
ready for
We are ready for our question portion of the show.
housekeeping?
Before we do that,
Yes.
there are 1,100 people watching, but only 300 likes.
Whoa.
Please like the stream. It helps us a lot. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Turn on that notification bell so you know we're live. We're trying to get to 180,000 subscribers, and we're really close. So share our videos, our shorts, our episodes. It would mean a lot to us. Remember that donations and members get priority on questions. And you want to add your thing about milkshakes?
Hey, it's barely more than my diet soda here.
Right,
And way healthier.
right,
And way cheaper than a milkshake.
right.
You can probably buy 2 memberships with what it costs to get a big milkshake.
Thank you to George Politis for your donation. Warriors Come Out to Play says, the framers of the Constitution recognized that partisan politics could break checks and balances. Why, 250 years later, why was there a 250-year delay before that happened?
Well, you're absolutely right about the framers, particularly George Washington. George Washington railed against the development of political parties. And he tried to get Jefferson and Hamilton to stop being at others' throats. But there was only one George Washington who really, in a sense, was against politics. And he was pushing against the tide in his efforts to stem the rise of political parties. But we didn't wait 250 years. What happened in 1861, Sam?
There was a civil war.
It was a civil war, so partisan politics leading to massive bloodshed long preceded our own time.
This is from member Dirtier Dog. They say, Professor, I know you like to speculate and play lawyer.
Oh,
Or maybe he doesn't like to speculate.
yeah, I
and play
don't like
lawyer.
to speculate. I do like to play lawyer.
If the most recent Epstein files exclude any new incriminating information about Trump, why has he been so incredibly defensive about the release of these files?
I had not gone through the files, so I'm relying on what CNN and other outfits with the resources to go through millions of documents. Didn't you say Trump was mentioned 1,500 times?
Yes.
So while there may not be a smoking gun,
It's embarrassing for
it's
him.
really, and the one thing Trump hates is embarrassment. So I said he doesn't mind attacks because you can always turn around and tax, but it's very difficult for him to deal with embarrassment because it's such a big blow to his ego. Plus, we don't know what's in the redacted stuff, and we
Right.
don't know what's in the 2 to 3 million files yet to be released.
Very true. Thank you, Gem675, for becoming a member.
Awesome.
This is from Baboy QC. How worried are you about the growing political alignment inside federal agencies, such as FBI agents being removed over anti-Trump internal message and ICE being framed around loyalty? Moreover, the long-term danger this kind of selective cleansing poses to a democracy, especially if a future administration inherits agencies it can no longer control or trust.
You put your finger on something incredibly important. What Trump denigrates as the deep state is not the deep state. The deep state are people like Trump who use their power and their wealth to control and manipulate our politics.
Projection, like you said.
Yes, projection. This is really dangerous because, these agencies and departments, yes, they have to reflect the priorities of the president. There's no doubt about it. But They are supposed to be serving the Constitution of the United States and the people of the United States. To have them simply be another arm of the political side of the government is incredibly dangerous, and it's a danger that goes beyond, as the audience member points out, beyond the Trump administration. Any president could follow in Trump's wake and politicize and turn the departments of and agencies of government into an instrument of control. And we have certainly seen that under Donald Trump with the Department of Justice, which is supposed to serve the Constitution and the people. It's not the president's, the Attorney General is not the president's lawyer. President has his own White House counsel, and yet Trump has turned the FBI, ICE, Border Patrol, the Department of Justice into his own personal toadies.
Actually, I've been making an error this episode. Some people pointed it out in the chat, and I just fact-checked it. Donald Trump was mentioned more than 38,000 times in the latest batch of Epstein files.
38,000? Is that possible?
That's according to the New York Times review of the Justice Department.
You sure? You sure it's not 3,800?
30.
And that's from the New York Times?
Yeah.
Wow. No wonder.
Yeah.
No wonder. Do we need to say any more?
Right. This is from.
And again, that's not us. That's another source.
Right. This is from member Alex Kawa. Taylor Remmett, the Democrat who just flipped a Trump +7 state Senate district in Texas by 14 points, ran a pretty progressive campaign emphasizing his position as a union leader, among other things. For the longest time, conventional wisdom has been that Democrats need to emphasize how moderate they are in order to win red and swing seats. Do you think that conventional wisdom is kind of changing now?
I think that conventional wisdom has never, ever been right. You know, having studied our politics from the founding to the present, the one thing I always tell candidates is be yourself. Be authentic. If you're a moderate, run as a moderate. You don't have to, twist and try to make believe you're a progressive. But if you're a progressive like Remmett or Mamdani, run as a progressive. The one thing voters don't like to see is phoniness. So don't think, you ought to listen to people like James Carville and these other consultants who send us down the primrose path to failure. Be yourself.
Good advice, Dad. This is a $20 donation from Josh Guckert. They say, Trump has lost a few points in approval polls every month, but it seems like he keeps hitting a hard basement. Do you think a sub-30 approval is possible in this age, or is polarization too high?
I think polarization is probably too high, and virtually, I think the only president to get down like that was Nixon right after the Watergate scandal. I think the lowest also in modern times was George W. Bush, who was 34% when he left office in the midst of the Great Recession. So I'd be surprised if he went under 30, but it wouldn't shock me if he got down to 34% like W. Bush.
This is from our new member, Brian. They say, do you think we could have violent riots or revolution if Trump enacts the Insurrection Act in order to stop the midterms?
I've been asked about that a lot. And, I've always said I don't expect another civil war. But if he tries to, send in the military or the National Guard or ICE to stop the midterms, I think that's at least possible. I hope it doesn't come to that.
The congressional hearings about ICE and Border Patrol were today. They were incredibly powerful. Were there only Dems attending? Please explain.
I didn't see that. I didn't realize. I thought it was March 3rd that Noam was coming in. Who came in today?
I think I saw clips of Renee Good's brothers testifying today.
Oh, I did not see that, so I can't comment.
Okay. This is from Junaid Naik. They say, speaking of Texas, do you think James Tallarico can win the Democratic primary over Jasmine Crockett? I think he also can win the general election.
It's a very close primary. I'm not predicting that he's going to win, but it's certainly possible that he is going to win. And I wonder if Texas, even if it's moving in a more blue direction, sadly, I wonder if they're ready for a woman African-American U.S. Senator.
This is from Dave, ZS7UO. They say, please talk about the next invasion. Here are my thoughts. We stole the Venezuelan oil, and I see our oil stocks doing well. Taking control of Iran's oil will make us the top empire of oil. I give the attack on Iran a 60% chance. Iran now has some SAMs from China, and they could impact our stealth.
I'm not sure. That's missiles.
Missiles that would impact our stealth.
The stealth fighters, bombers, yes. I'm not a military expert, so I do know, however, that Venezuela apparently did have Russian equipment, and it didn't do them any good against the American military. I can't believe Iran would be able to withstand the American military. But Iran is a much more populous country, much more complex country. It would be very, very difficult for America to control Iran, and I think absolutely foolhardy to try. We don't need the oil, and climate change experts have said, to the extent we're trying to extract more oil, what are we doing to the environment, Sam?
Destroying it.
Destroying it. It's not worth it.
But the Trump administration doesn't care.
No, they don't care. They've erased
Right, but they're the ones that are going to
change.
make the decision whether or not to attack Iran or
I
not.
don't think, I put nothing past Trump. I don't like to speculate.
Right, but you're leaning towards probably not going to happen.
Maybe some bombing, but not an all-out invasion.
This is a $2 donation from Gem675. They say, let's hear what you think about the Melania documentary.
I haven't seen it, but the reviews are about as bad as any reviews I've seen maybe since Amazon Women on the Moon. It's
What's that?
That's like, one of these totally panned old-fashioned, science fictions with, the rocket ships on strings.
Yeah. That sounds better. I haven't seen Melania either. But you know what the interesting thing is? On Rotten Tomatoes, Melania has a 5% critic score and a 99% audience score.
Is 5% critic score like an all-time record low?
No, there's been lower, but this might be an all-time record of discrepancy between the critic score and the audience score.
Well, here's why. You know why. It's the MAGA who's gone to see it.
No, I think there's something sketchy happening with this audience score.
That's also very possible.
It's got 1,000 plus verified ratings on the audience score, and it has a 99%. I don't even think Gone with the Wolves has a 99%.
Yeah, you think MAGA's rigged it?
I think there's something sketchy going on there.
Yeah.
99% audience score? Come on. With a 5% critic score?
As I said, it's the worst set of critic ratings that I've seen since I was a kid. And that's a long, long time ago.
I think Rotten Tomatoes is owned by Amazon, and Amazon did the film. And of course, everybody is saying that this is a backdoor bribe from Amazon to the Trump
imagine
administration. Let me double check that. Who owns Rotten Tomatoes? Fandango Media. It's a joint venture with Comcast, Universal. Oh, so maybe not Amazon.
Maybe not.
But still, there's something going
fishy
on
here, yeah.
5% critic rating, 99% audience score. Someone just said it has a 1.9 out of 10 on IMDb. So, yeah. And IMDb is, I think, all audience score ratings. So, if they're willing to rig Rotten Tomato scores, who knows what else they're willing to rig, right?
Nothing. Put nothing past them.
This is a $5 donation from the Switchboard. They say, do y'all think he's just closing the center so no one can use it, and they don't actually plan on doing any renovations?
No, I think he wants to put his mark on it. I think it's more than just shutting it down.
I'm thinking that the people in the chat, remember I was saying I think it's more nefarious. I think him tearing it down might be the more nefarious
Would
thing
not
that he's
surprise
got in
me
his mind.
one bit.
This is a $10 donation from the Mad Hatter Forever 23. They
right.
say, it's pretty clear that Reagan's influence within the Republican Party has vanished, especially with his positions on free trade and immigration. And is it possible his policies can make a comeback?
A lot of Reagan's policies have not disappeared. Reagan was not the free trader you may think he was. Milton Friedman, kind of the icon of free markets, blasted Reagan for talking big about free trade, but in fact acting in the opposite way. And, so many of Reagan's policies still survive. Deregulation, tax cuts, huge tax cuts for the wealthy, aggressive foreign ventures. So probably the one area that has shifted most is immigration. But let's not forget, Reagan also championed anti-abortion positions and other cultural icons of the far right. So I think it's very much of an exaggeration to say that the Reagan legacy has been abandoned. It's been slightly shifted, but that's all.
This is a $10 donation from...
The one other thing I might say is, Trump is, while not deviating that much from Reagan policies, is way more corrupt than Reagan ever was. Reagan had some integrity. Trump has none.
This is a $10 donation from the Joe Bang. They say, can the Supreme Court reverse its decision to give Trump immunity so that he can be held back from breaking the law left and right and R-wording the country?
Supreme Court can do whatever it wants.
Really?
Absolutely it can. I don't think it will. But Supreme Court, to quote the great poet T.S. Eliot, decisions and revisions that a minute can reverse.
This is a $5 donation from Zoe K. Lynch. They say, please share your thoughts about the two journalists, Don Lemon and Georgia Fort, who were arrested for documenting the Minnesota church protest.
It's a travesty, but it's not inconsistent with what he's been doing. He constantly threatens journalists, constantly threatens broadcast outlets with removing their license. He threatens journalists and broadcast companies with lawsuits. His administration recently executed a search warrant on the home of a journalist, something that almost never happens. So this is part of his intimidation campaign to silence any kind of dissent. Remember, I've talked about this a lot, and I have guided you to the book, The Spin Dictators, in which it notes that in the modern era, yes, authoritarianism does have the boot in the face, to quote George Orwell, but also, like George Orwell pointed out, it is mostly the result of controlling what we think and what we believe.
Don't forget to like the stream. Would it be accurate to label J. Robert Oppenheimer a war criminal, or does responsibility for the use of the atomic weapons rest primarily on political and military leaders?
Oh, it clearly rests primarily on political and military leaders, and no way is Oppenheimer a war criminal in my view.
Right. This is from member Limited Light. They say, what do you think of someone claiming the multiple angles of video show Alex Preddy brandished and then lost his weapon in the scuffle 8 or 9 days after the event? I'm not quite following what you're asking.
There was a scuffle before he was shot.
Right, but yeah.
I'm not sure if that's what they're referring to.
I think
that's part of this smear campaign. So if we can smear him enough, they've even, put out this phony stuff that he was fired for inappropriate behavior. He wasn't. He's supposedly this agitator, this terrorist. If you can smear him enough, we can justify killing him. Come on. How low can you sink?
Good point. This is from our friend Patrick Murray. They
say,
he's
a great friend.
The U.S. and China/Russia they have space forces.
Correct.
With tense geopolitics and innovation technology, is it possible to have a war in space? Do you see this happening in the future?
Absolutely, it's possible.
Yikes!
You've all seen Star Wars, right? Of course, it's possible. And we do have now space forces. There are space is supposed to be under international treaties free of any kind of weaponry, but as we know, these treaties are not always perfectly adhered to. I don't see this happening anytime soon, but I do see this as a possibility down the road.
Does the one big atrocity give Trump the national policy key in his favor? I guess the tax bill, the one big ugly bill, I guess they're asking.
I haven't decided yet. It's too soon.
Right.
People have asked me all the time about the keys, and, the election's almost 3 years away. I have not turned the keys yet, but it could.
This is from Rob's 7789. They say, hello from Minneapolis. Just wanted to make a quick note that this past Saturday there was a bike memorial ride for Alex Preddy in South Minneapolis. Nearly 10,000 riders participated. It was great seeing the community come together and honor his life.
Glad to hear that. It warms my heart. And I've said so many times, getting out and protesting, voting with your feet is very important. And I want to point out something here that's very important. We've seen hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people coming out to protest against, ICE, Border Patrol, Kristi Noem, the Department of Homeland Security. We haven't seen virtually anyone coming out in support of ICE, the Border Patrol, and DHS. That's usually you do see counter protests. Or look at, the issue of abortion. You have huge demonstrations on both sides. We don't see that here. We only really see people voting with their feet in one way.
Our one sports question of the night.
Oh, I'll leave that for you.
No, it's for you. It's from our resident Giants fan, James LaGruta. They say, what are your thoughts on the Giants' offensive coordinator hire? I'm predicting a 9-8 season.
Yeah, I'm not competent enough to evaluate, coaching staff beyond the head coach. I'm very, very excited about John Harbaugh, the new head coach.
Yeah, you stole my coach.
Yeah, we stole. Well, first he quit, so we didn't really steal him. And I think 9-8 is well within reach.
All right, with that, we will begin to wrap up Lichtman Live for the evening. Remember, if you're watching live, give us a like. If you're watching later on, give us a like. No matter when you're watching, you can give us a like. A couple of shout-outs on donations. $5 from Free Throw Guy 22. They say, Sam, ask your pops if he knows what swag means, and then let him know I said he has it. You know what swag means?
Sure.
I mean, swagger is an old term,
yeah,
right?
It's a positive term for swagger without the negative connotations.
People in the chat want to know who you're predicting for the Super Bowl winner.
Seattle.
Me too. $5 donation from Joanne Roberts. They say Australia is seeing a rise in people following the very dangerous Pauline Hanson from One Nation Party.
Yes.
Thankful a Democratic Party are government.
In your government,
right.
Yes. But, anti-democratic parties are proliferating. We just saw a right-winger winning, of all places, usually liberal Costa Rica.
Right. And she also said, another donation said, hey, all, no questions, just my usual donation. Hope it helps. P.S. Trump is a vengeful child.
Imagine that. But he's a child with great big guns, unfortunately. And I don't mean on his body.
Not like me. Bang.
Not like you.
All right. With that was embarrassing. I don't know why I did that. With that.
That's all right.
Oh, thanks. With that, we will wrap up Lichtman Live for this evening. Dad, what are your final words to the people?
I will leave you with something positive, reiterating something I said a little while ago. It is a very positive sign that we have huge demonstrations against the horrors that Kristi Noem and her minions are wreaking on our people, and we see virtually no demonstrations in support of the other side. Very positive sign for our society.
All right, folks. See you on Thursday, and good night.
Good night.